there is a persistent myth. It's a very enduring and engaging story that Mrs. O'Leary, who was a very fine, upstanding Irish woman, about 40 years old, who was married to Patrick O'Leary. They lived at 137 DeCoven Street in Chicago. And like many people, they had animals. She had a milk business, so she would milk her cows. And the story goes that one of her cows kicked over the lantern, and that started the Chicago fire.
Only it didn't happen like that. We'd later learn a reporter made up the story about O'Leary's cow. It took until 1997 till the Chicago City Council officially exonerated Mrs. O'Leary from blame.
We know the fire started in the barn, but to this day, we have no definitive evidence, only theories about how the fire started.
What is known is that weather, miscommunication, and Chicago's booming population in the late 1800s would play a major role in triggering the Great Chicago Fire.
1871, Chicago has a population of about 300,000 people. Chicago is just exploding in terms of its size and scale. They needed to provide housing for all of these people arriving that came predominantly with the arrival of the railroads to Chicago. New businesses needed new structures, and Chicago was in the fortunate position of being nestled between two states, Wisconsin and Michigan, heavily timbered. A lake provided the means of transportation. That lumber is there for Chicago, and they build not only the homes and the businesses, but most of the sidewalks and even many of the streets are paved with wood. So it is a wooden city because it was cheap and plentiful, and you could build very quickly. The summer before the fire had been particularly dry. There had been almost no rain, and the month of October especially dry.
To make matters worse, a fire on October 7th left the firemen exhausted and damaged some of their equipment. Then came October 8th, 1871.
Started about 9:30, 9:45 in the evening. Miscommunication sent the fire department to the wrong location. There was about a 30-mile-an-hour wind, and that fanned the flames. And by the time the firefighters got there, it was literally out of control. What happened with this fire too is once it got to a certain size, it basically created its own weather. The fire became so hot, it was superheating the air above it, and that was feeding the fire, and the fire was then feeding that oxygen and superheating it, and it sort of became this almost self-perpetuating system.
As the flames spread, people ran for their lives.
The fire really devastated most of the central part of Chicago, basically 3.5 square miles.
The city finally stopped burning.
The value that the insurance companies placed on the loss of structures was something like $200 million, which was unheard of.
Chicago's famed water tower was one of the few structures to survive. But so did Chicago's fighting spirit.
People believed in Chicago, and they believed that the city could survive this. The Chicago Tribune came out within a couple of days, and it had this inspiring editorial, ending with the famous words, "Chicago shall rise again." People really believed it, and that's one of the reasons why the Chicago fire story is so powerful and persists. It was partly because of that spirit that they wanted this story to be enduring and to be an inspiring part of the legacy of the city. And so they made sure they told the story in a certain way, with Mrs. O'Leary as part of it. And it became a touchstone. It's one of the stars on our flag.
As a result of the fire, the Chicago Fire Department was reorganized, and the rebuilding of the city took place in record time, with people believing Chicago could be even better than it had been.